So we're here in a new version of MarksChanged, and one of the biggest feature requests that I've heard is the ability to actually save away different stored marks names that you can compare against. And the reason for this is that you may be using selection filters here in the model to filter out concrete or to filter by phase where you have different numbering settings throughout the progress of the job, and you want to be able to create stored mark settings for each of those individual phases. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this works. If we come in here, I've got underneath my selection filters different steel phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 here saved away. So once I've loaded these here, I can actually change my selection to objects and components to make sure I'm getting everything that I want here in the model. And then I'm just grabbing all of those objects that are in that particular phase. And if I want to know that I'm really only getting parts, we can make sure that parts are only selected here. And then again, we're windowing around, and it looks like I've got some loose objects here that needed to be rephased that didn't get caught. But either way, if I select on these pieces here, what I can do is I can then type in a phase number up at the top called phase 1. And so then I'm just going to go ahead and store the numbers for that phase. So once that's all done, you'll then see that it will create a new phase 1 XML file here in the MarksChanged folder. So before, in the previous versions, there was only one MarksChanged XML that lived inside of the model folder. Now there's a MarksChanged subfolder, and you can have multiple files here in that subfolder. And so once we do that, it gets added to the list here. So now what we want to do is we're going to change our selection to phase 2. So let's go to phase 2, and we're going to window around everything here. We'll just enter in phase 2, and we'll say store the numbers. So we can repeat this process for all of the phases on the project as we continue to progress. So let's just do phase 3 as an example. Change our selection to phase 3. Now, you do need to be very careful with this. Like if you're going to go this route of using selected objects, you know, one or two people that are really trained on the tool should probably only do this. So that way that they basically make sure that they're setting the selection filters correctly and then loading up the right settings. If you try to compare phase 2, for instance, while nothing is selected, or if phase 3 is selection filter is set here, you're going to get all sorts of new objects being reported and things like that. So you got to be very careful. All right, so there's phase 3, and then let's do phase 4 just to make sure that we've got all 4 of our things here. And so we'll just window around the remaining set of objects, and then we'll just go ahead and say store numbers there. All right, so we've got 4 new files that are now being created here that we can basically recall and work with. So we'll see those in the drop down. Now, what I want to show you is this is how this works. If we change our selection filter here, and let's act like multiple detailers are working on the job in different phases at the same time. If we come over here to phase 4 as an example, and we change this to W24 by 55, and I modify this, it now makes a change of some objects and things that are going on over there. If we come over here to phase 1, let's go ahead and make this a W16 by 36 as an example, and we'll go ahead and say modify. We now have a change between phase 1 versus phase 4. I'm going to go ahead and just do a numbering here. So let's go to perform numbering modified, and then we'll go ahead and say save. And I'm just going to redraw here, so we'll just change our selection back, redraw the window. Okay, I've made a change in phase 4 and in phase 1. So what I want to do is I want to only evaluate now the changes over in phase 1, because that's where I'm working at, let's say as a lead detailer over here, while others are working in a different area. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to changing my selection filter to phase 1. We'll do objects and components, and let's just change to select only parts as an example. And now we need to make sure that we window around all the objects in the model that are part of phase 1. Now, I remember here that I didn't grab some of this stuff that didn't get phased right, so we probably will see some changes, like some objects that are new over here because I just am now selecting them. But that's a good example. If new objects were created in phase 1 and they're part of your selection filter, they're going to show up here as new in this list because that's what we're processing. Now, let's go ahead and change this back to phase 1. So we're loading up phase 1 here, and we're working with phase 1 on our selection filter, and that's what's selected in the model. Let's go ahead and press the check marks button. That's going to then compare all of the objects that are selected to whatever was previously stored in this phase 1 file, and then it will tell us what those changes are. And there we go. We've got this object here has changed mark as well as changed its quantity, and then these yellow objects are just changed quantity here. Now, let's see, I'm not sure. So we do have some new. So you'll see that the anchor rods here are blue. So they're new. So they were newly added in my selection filter versus what was previously saved. So this is how you can use the new multiple stored marks name settings to actually go through and just build different selection filters, like say by phase, or filtering only steel and filtering out other objects. And you can control things based on selection and a group or saved numbering settings name versus just it all being one file only. If you're interested in trying out the MarksChanged extension, you can come in here to the Tekla warehouse and do a search for MarksChanged, and then this extension will appear. You just click on that and you can download it, or you can go to the versions tab here and you can pick the specific version that you're working with. If you go to the details tab, you'll see all of the release notes as well as videos and instructional tutorials. And then you can also subscribe to this particular extension up here at the top, or this whole group and collection by CMK BIM Consulting.